Ilhan Omar harbored the mistaken belief that she could effectively humiliate and embarrass Ted Cruz by launching a targeted offensive against his Canadian place of birth during a high-stakes Senate hearing. However, she completely neglected to consider one absolutely pivotal and critical regarding her opponent, specifically that Ted Cruz represents far more than merely a standard politician engaging in trivial political theatrics, because he stands as a highly accomplished constitutional attorney who has successfully presented arguments before the United States Supreme Court on 9 separate and distinct occasions upon the moment when Omar portrayed him as a deceptive Canadian fraudster and cast doubt upon his allegiance to the United States. Cruz offered a smile that was not indicative of friendliness, but rather resembled the calculated expression of a seasoned prosecutor who had just been presented with the ultimate strategic opportunity, expressing his gratitude for her questioning of his loyalty. Before pivoting to interrogate her own fidelity, he continued to unseal a dossier containing detailed financial banking records, establishing that during the tenure of her service on the Foreign Affairs Committee, you accepted the substantial sum of $250,000, originating from organizations that are financially supported by foreign governments, including entities situated within Qatar and organizations possessing strong ties to Turkey, as well as groups maintaining documented connections to the Muslim Brotherhood. You deliberately cast your legislative votes to support and advance their interests, while you simultaneously failed to disclose these substantial payments for a duration of 3 years, and you never formally registered as a foreign agent, as is strictly required by federal statutes. So, when you choose to pontificate about the concept of loyalty, Congresswoman, one must ask, whose interests were you actually serving, those of the state of Minnesota or those of the foreign entities providing you with compensation? The entire hearing room erupted into chaos. And I specifically strongly encourage you to aggressively press that subscribe button immediately, because you are on the verge of witnessing the most destructive and legal sound cross-examination ever recorded in the history of the legislature. This Supreme Court advocate, the distinguished individual who served as a clerk for Chief Justice Rehnquist and successfully claimed the title of the United States National Debating Championship, just produced irrefutable documentary evidence that possesses the potential to send a sitting congresswoman to federal prison. Ted Cruz has been meticulously preparing for this specific moment. For many months, having thoroughly examined Omar's financial disclosures alongside her corrected tax returns and her legislative record, enabling him to identify a disturbing pattern that appears indistinguishable from foreign influence operation that results in Senator Bob Menendez being sent to prison. You see, Omar operated under the assumption that her allies in the squad would offer her protection, and she believed that attacking Cruz's citizenship would successfully position her as of the victim, while thinking that progressive activism could, somehow, overcome hard evidence. However, she was catastrophically and fundamentally incorrect, because when you chose to attack a constitutional lawyer who has argued cases before the Supreme Court, someone who possesses intimate knowledge of every federal statute and every ethics rule and every requirement mandated by the Foreign Agents Registration Act, you had better ensure that your own hands are completely clean. Omar's hands, however, appear to be covered in foreign currency that she failed to reveal for a period of 3 years, and this situation is significantly larger than the corruption of a single congresswoman. This represents the day that America testified exactly what transpires when foreign governments successfully compromised a sitting member of Congress, and a Supreme Court advocate exposes that compromise with documentation. This is the historic day. An activist encountered a prosecutor who possessed every single jaya receipt. So, Let us proceed. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. Room was filled with an unusual and palpable tension, because it was not an everyday occurrence for a House member to be called to testify before a Senate committee. But these were certainly not normal. At times, especially 6 months after Senator Bob Menendez was convicted of accepting gold bars and cash payments from foreign governments, the Senate Judiciary Committee was actively investigating foreign influence operations targeting Congress, and Representative Ilhan Omar had been subpoenaed not because she was accused of specific crimes just yet, but because her removal from the House Foreign Affairs Committee and she highly controversial foreign policy positions rendered her directly relevant to and the ongoing inquiry. Omar possesses no desire to be present, having spent 2 full weeks on social media platforms attacking the hearing as an exercise in Islamophobia and xenophobia, while her allies in the squad rallied to her defense, but the subpoena was legally valid, and she was forced to appear. Senator Ted Cruz sat at the committee dais, meticulously reviewed documents as a senior Republican member, having been investigating patterns of foreign influence for months, and Omar's financial disclosures had specifically caught his attention due to altered tax returns, filed quietly, and late disclosure forms and consulting income, originating from entities with suspicious backgrounds and votes that consistently aligned with specific foreign interests. Cruz remains uncertain at that juncture if it constitutes corruption or merely incompetence, but he had prepared for both possibilities because Ted Cruz did not approach any task with half measures, given that when he argued before the Supreme Court, he prepared for months, and when he debated, he studied every conceivable angle, and when he conducted cross-examination, he aimed for a decisive victory. If Omar wished to make this personal encounter, he was fully ready. Ilhan Omar walked into the Senate hearing room with the demeanor of someone walking into battle, wearing a black headscarf and a fierce expression, with squad members flanking her as a display of solidarity, while progressive activists packed the gallery wearing shirts proclaiming "We stand with Ilhan." She had been preparing for this confrontation for weeks, not by her financial records or consulting with ethics lawyer, but by crafting the perfect social media narrative of a Republican witch hunt and an all-time Islamophobic attack, claiming they cannot handle a strong Muslim. The woman with every angle calculated for maximum victim status and fundraising potential. Omar had perfected this playbook over 6 years, which involved getting attacked by Republicans, positioning herself as the victim of bigotry, and raising millions from progressive donors, which had worked against Trump and worked against McCarthy. So she wondered why it wouldn't work against Cruz. However, she had made a critical and fatal miscalculation, because Trump and McCarthy were playing specific politics, where Ted Cruz was a lawyer who had argued before the Supreme Court, and he did not traffic in sound bites. He trafficked in hard evidence, and when Omar's team decided their optimal strategy was to attack Cruz's Canadian birth and question his genuine loyalty to America, they were unintentionally handed over to him the perfect opening because provoked a lawyer anger more than hypocrisy, and Omar questioned someone else's loyalty, while potentially accepting foreign money constitutes grade A Supreme Court level hypocrisy. Cruz intended to dismantle it methodically, not with emotion and not with rhetoric, but with documents, including bank records, tax returns, FAR registration, and voting records, representing the kind of evidence that holds up in federal court. Ted Cruz appeared almost relaxed at the committee table, but anyone who knew him understood. This was his apex predator mode, representing the calm before systematic destruction, because Cruz had clerked for Chief Justice Rehnquist, and he had argued before the Supreme Court 9 times, involving cases regarding legal law and state sovereignty and Second Amendment rights. Having won the U.S. National Debating Championship and having been named National Speaker of the Year, while his Harvard Law classmates described him as off the brilliant charts and unwilling to yield or compromise. And his signature move in card games was to shoot the moon, representing the riskiest and most aggressive strategy. And today, he was going absolutely all in. Positioned in front of him were 5 distinct folders. The first containing Omar's altered tax returns, showing previously undisclosed income. The second, containing bank, showing records, wire transfers, from foreign entities. The third, containing the FAR database, showing no registration as a foreign agent. The fourth, containing her voting record on legislation affecting those entities, and the fifth containing emails discussed consulting, arrangements representing every document obtained legally, through Congressional Oversight Authority and public records requests, with nothing classified and nothing illegal, just a paper trail that narrated a very concerning story. Cruz remains uncertain if Omar had committed federal crimes, but he was certain she had violated Senate ethics rules and House disclosure requirements and possible FAR. But more importantly, he was certain she had attacked the wrong person, because when a Supreme Court advocate conducts cross-examination with documentary evidence, you do not walk away unscathed. You get destroyed inventory. Durbin gavelled the hearing to order, stating, "The Senate Judiciary Committee will come to order," and announced that today's hearing examines foreign influence targeting members of Congress in light of the recent conviction of former Senator Menendez for accepting bribes from foreign governments. This committee has a duty to examine potential vulnerabilities in our ethics and disclosure systems, and we have invited Representative Omar to provide testimony about her experience serving on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and her understanding of foreign influence operations. Committee Dubin's tone remains neutral, but the subtext was unmistakably clear that Omar's removed from that committee and her controversial foreign policy positions made her relevant. Omar's opening statement was predictably defiant, stating, "Mr. Chairman, thank you for inviting me, though I question whether this invitation was truly voluntarily given the subpoena. I want to be clear. This hearing is part of a pattern of targeting Muslim members of Congress, and since I arrived in Congress, I have faced constant attacks, questioning my loyalty, my faith, and my patriotism. And I am here today because I refuse to be intimidated, and I will continue to speak the truth to power, even when that makes people uncomfortable." She looked directly at Ted Cruz, stating, "Some on this committee have built careers attacking immigrants and questioning whether people born outside the U.S. can truly be loyal Americans, representing a clear shot at Cruz's Canadian birth. So I find it rich that I am here being questioned about foreign influence when members of this very committee I have taken millions from foreign loyal lobbies, and dual concerns are only raised when it is about Muslims." Cruz did not react and just took notes. Congresswoman Omar Cruz finally said, with his voice calm, "I just want to clarify something for the record you just referenced. Members of this committee taking money from foreign lobbies and questioned our loyalty. So, were you referring to me, specifically?" Omar did not back down, stating, "If the shoe fits, Senator, you were born in Canada and you did not renounce your Canadian citizenship until 2014, and you have taken millions from foreign interests. So yes, I question whether you understand what real American loyalty means." It was perfectly calculated to make Cruz look defensive and to make his Canadian birth the story, and to position Omar as the brave truth-teller. So the room waited for Cruz's angry response. But Ted Cruz was smiling. Not a friendly smile, but the smile of a Supreme Court advocate who just got the exact opening he needed. "Thank you for that clarification, Congresswoman, because your questioning of my loyalty and my citizenship gives me standing to explore similar questions about your conduct. He reached for the first folder, saying, "Let us discuss the $250,000 in undisclosed payments you received from foreign entities. Shall we?" Ted Cruz opened the folder deliberately with every movement calculated for maximum impact. Congresswoman Omar, you served on the House Foreign Affairs Committee from January 2019 until February 2023. Correct. Yes. Until Republicans removed me in a partisan vote, which we will get to. But during those 4 years, you voted on legislation affecting Qatar and Turkey and several other Middle Eastern nations. Correct. I voted on lots of legislation. That is my job. Indeed it is. Now, let us look at your financial disclosure forms for those same years. Cruz held up official House documents saying, "These are your required annual financial disclosures, and members of Congress must report all income over $200, including consulting fees, speaking fees, and payments from any source. And you are familiar with these requirements. Of course, good. Now in 2019, you reported congressional salary and some book royalties. Nothing unusual. And in 2020, same thing, congressional, salary, some royalties, a similar pattern." Cruz paused. But then something interesting happened in March 2024, because you filed financial disclosures for 2019 and 2020 and 2021. He held up the altered forms, stating these amendments added previously unreported income totaling $247,500, which is $250,000. Congresswoman representing income you failed to report for 3 years until you quietly, 47, altered. The forms last year, Omar tried to interrupt, saying, "My accountant made an error. Please do not interrupt, Congresswoman, because you will have time to explain." Cruz pulled out bank records saying, "I have bank records obtained through congressional oversight authority, and they show wire transfers to your personal account from several entities. In December 2019, $45,000 from Doha Policy Institute. In March 2030, $7,500 from Mediterranean Research Center. In August 2040, $1,000 from Justice and Development Foundation. In June 2021, $55,000 from Atlantic Bridge Alliance. And in November 2021, $70,000 from Global Understanding Initiative, totaling $247,500, exactly matching your disclosed disclosures." Cruz looked directly at Omar, asking Congresswoman, "Can you explain what services you provided to these organizations that warranted $250,000 in payments?" Omar shifted in her seat, stating, "Those were legitimate speaking fees and policy consultations, and I am allowed to earn income outside Congress." "You are Cruz," agreed, "but you are required to disclose it, which you did not for 3 years. But, more related, is who these entities are. So, let us examine them." Cruz pulled out detailed research reports. The Doha Policy Institute is based in Qatar, with primary funding from the Qatari government and a focus on advocacy for Qatar's foreign policy interests. The Mediterranean Research Center is a Turkish government-backed think tank that advocates for Erdogan regime positions. The Justice and Development Foundation is named after Turkey's ruling AK party and has multiple board members with ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. The Atlantic Bridge Alliance is registered in Luxembourg, with funding sources unclear, and advocates against U.S. sanctions on various Middle Eastern regimes, and the Global Understanding Initiative is another Qatar-funded entity that promotes opposition to Saudi Arabia and UAE policies. Cruz, let that sink in. So, in summary, Congresswoman, while serving on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, you received $250,000 from organizations 100 funded by or tied to foreign governments whose policies you voted to support in Congress, and you did not disclose any of it until 3 years later, when someone started asking questions. So, does that accurately summarize the situation? Omar's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. Senator Cruz. These were legitimate. OLEF, a non-10 and lumen/10. Consulting arrangements, and my lawyer approved them, and I corrected the disclosure error when it was discovered. Cruz smiled coldly, stating, "Your lawyer approved payments from foreign government-funded entities while you sat on the Foreign Affairs Committee, which is interesting. So let us examine the timing of your discovery. Shall we represent? You mentioned discovering an error, so let us examine the timeline." Cruz pulled out a detailed chronology, stating December 2019. First payment received required. Disclosure. May 2020 you filed. No disclosure, March 2022. Payment required disclosure. May 2020 you filed no disclosure. August 2023 payment required disclosure. May 2021 you filed no disclosure. June 2021. Fourth payment required disclosure. May 2022 you filed no disclosure. November 2021. Fifth payment required disclosure. May 2022 you filed no disclosure. So we have 5 separate disclosure deadlines. You missed. And that is not one error. That is a pattern. Now, when did you suddenly discover this error and file amendments? March 2024, which is 3 full years after the first payment and 2 years after the last payment. So, what happened in March 2024 that triggered this sudden discovery? Congresswoman Omar hesitated. Cruz did not wait for an answer, saying, "Let me help you remember that in February 2024, this committee announced we were launching an investigation into foreign influence operations following the Menendez conviction. And in early March 2024, we sent document preservation notices to several members of Congress, and you filed your amendments 3 days after receiving that notice, so you did not discover an error. Congresswoman, you clarified your disclosures when you learned we were investigating, and that is not correcting a mistake that is covering your tracks." Cruz said forward, saying, "Here is what concerns me. You took $250,000 from foreign government-funded entities you failed to disclose it for 3 years, and you only corrected the record when you learned investigators were coming, and that is not an accountant's error that is concealed. But the payments themselves are only the first problem. So let me show you what you did for that money." Cruz opened the 4th folder containing her voting record, saying, "Let us examine how you voted on legislation affecting the very entities that paid you. In July 2020, there was a resolution condemning Qatar's support for terrorist organizations. You voted no. Being one of only 17 members to oppose it, Qatar's Doha Policy Institute had paid you $45,000 6 months earlier in September 2020 legislation to authorize Turkey for purchasing Russian. You voted no, being one of only 11 members, versus Turkey's Mediterranean Research Center had paid you $37,500 that same month. And in March 2021, resolution expresses concern about Turkey's human rights record. You voted no, and the Justice and 90 SM Development Foundation tied to Turkey's ruling party would pay you $40,000 3 months later. In November 2021, legislative supporting sanctions on organizations tied to Muslim Brotherhood, you voted no, and the Global Understanding Initiative, which advocates Brotherhood positions, paid you $70,000. That exact same month, Cruz spread out the documents, stating, "Represented a woman, you received $250,000 from foreign government entities and you voted exactly as those entities would want on every single piece of others relevant legislation, and that is not representing Minnesota's interests, that is representing the interests of discord, is paying you. But it gets worse, because you were required by federal law to register for this activity and you did not represent it, woman. Are you familiar with the Foreign Agents Registration Act? Generally, yes. Let me be more specific. FAR requires anyone who acts as an agent of a foreign principal to register with the Department of Justice, which includes anyone who Cruz read from the statute engages in political activities for or in the interests of a foreign principal, acts in a public relations capacity for a foreign principal, solicits or dispenses anything of value within the United States for a foreign principal. The law is very clear that if you are working on behalf of foreign interests and receiving payment, you must register. Failure to register is a federal felony. So, do you understand that requirement? Yes, but it does not apply to me. I was a member of Congress. Actually, Cruz interrupted. Members of Congress are not exempt from FARA because the exemption is for activities within official governmental duties. He pulled out a legal analysis stating your official duties include voting on legislative services and committee work, but your official duties do not include consulting for foreign government-funded think tanks. When you provided policy consultation to the Doha Policy Institute, a Qatari government entity, that was not your official duty. When you gave speeches for payment to Turkish government-backed organizations, that was not your official duty. Those were private activities for payment for entities acting as foreign principals under FAR, and you were required to register as a foreign agent. Cruz held up a Department of Justice database search, saying, I had my staff search the DOJ's FAR database. Would you like to know how many registrations we found in your name? Omar was silent. 0. Not one registration. So you took $250,000 from foreign government-funded entities. You provided consulting services to them, and you failed to register as the law requires. And that is a violation of 22 U.S.C. Section 612, a felony, punishable by up to 5 years in federal prison. Do you understand the Venus of this Congresswoman? Perhaps you are familiar with Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign chairman, correct? In 2018, he was convicted of multiple federal crimes, among them failure to register as a foreign agent under FAR. Manafort had received millions from pro-Russian Ukrainian politicians, and he provided political consulting services, and he failed to register. So the Department of Justice prosecuted him. He was convicted, and he prison time. Cruz pulled out. The Manafort indicted. The accused charged that Manafort knowingly and willfully engaged in a systematic scheme to hide income and evasive taxes, and that he acted as an unregistered agent of foreign principals. So, does any of this sound you received? Payments from foreign HUA, government entities. You provided consulting services to them, you failed to register. Under FAR, you hid the income by not disclosing it, and you only revealed it when investigators started asking questions. The parallels to Manafort are striking. Omar's lawyer was frantically writing notes, stating, Senator Representative Omar's familiar situation is completely different. How is it different? Cruz cut him off. Both involved payments from foreign entities, both involved failure to register under FAR. Both involved concealment of income. Both involved providing services to foreign principals. And the only difference I can see is that Manafort was a campaign consultant, and Omar was a sitting member of Congress. If anything, that makes Omar's conduct more serious, not less, because she had a higher duty to disclose, and she was voting on legislation affecting the very entities. Paying her, Paul Manafort went to prison. Why should not I, Omar, let me be very specific about what the law requires? Congresswoman, Cruz displays FAR regulations on the committee screen, saying under 22 U.S.C. Section 611C, a foreign principal includes a government of a foreign country and a foreign political party. The Doha Policy. The institute is funded by the Qatari government, and that makes it a principal. The Mediterranean Research Center is funded by the Turkish government, and that makes it a foreign principal under the statute. An agent of a foreign principal includes anyone who acts as an agent, representative, or attorney. For a foreign principal at the order request, or under the direction of a foreign principal, engage whose in political activities for, or in the interests of such foreign principal, you provided policy, consulting to these foreign organizations, and that is acting as an agent. You did it for payment, and that is at the request of the foreign principal. Your consulting involved foreign policy matters that affect their governmental interests, and that is political activities under 22 U.S.C. Section 612. Anyone meeting this definition must register with the Attorney General within 10 days. The registration statement must include the identity of the foreign principal, the nature of the relationship, and the comprehensive statement of the nature of registrant's activities. Cruz held up the blank search result from DOJ, saying, "You never registered, not within 10 days, not within 10 months, not within 10 years. You are still not registered. Failure to register is a crime under 22 U.S.C. Section 618. Any person who willfully violates any provision of this subchapter shall be guilty of a felony, and upon conviction shall be punished by a fine of not more than $10,000, or imprisoned for not more than 5 years or both." Congresswoman, you have admitted to receiving payments from foreign government entities. You have admitted to providing consulting services you have not registered by your own admissions. You have violated FAR. The question is not whether you broke the law. The question is whether the Department of Justice will prosecute. Let us return to your voting record, Congresswoman, because the pattern is damning. Cruz opened a comprehensive analysis saying, "I had my staff compile every cast that related to the vote entities that paid you, and the foreign correlation is remarkable. Qatar paid you $45,000 in December 2019. So, let us look at Qatar-related votes. Then pay January 2020 resolution. Praising Qatar's coordinate efforts, you voted yes March 2020 amendment to increase oversight of Qatar's Al Jazeera network. You voted no July 2020 resolution condemning Qatar's support for designated terrorist organizations. You voted no September 2020 amendment to condition aid to Qatar. On human rights improvements, you voted no. 4 votes, 4 positions, exactly aligned with Qatari government interests. Turkey paid you $77,500 across 2020 and 2021. Your Turkey votes, September 2020 sanctions on Turkey for S-400 missile purchase from Russia. You voted no. October 2020. Resolution declare Armenian genocide. You voted present strongly to condemn Turkey. March 2021. Resolution expresses concern about Turkey's human rights record. You voted no. May 2021. Amendment to condition military aid to Turkey. You voted no. August 2021 resolution supporting sanctions on Turkish officials. You voted no. 5 votes, 5 positions, perfectly aligned with Erdogan regime interests. Cruz looked up from the document says, "Congresswoman, you want to know what is? Interesting. Before these payments, your voting record on these issues was more mixed in 2019. Before the payments started, you voted yes on a resolution condemning Qatar's blockade of neighboring countries in early 2019. You co-sponsored critical legislation of Turkish military operations, but after the money started flowing, your votes changed consistently. Predictably, you voted exactly as the entities paying you would want every single time. That is not representing your constituents. That is not independent foreign policy analysis. That is voting as directed by anyone is paying you. Now, let me show you something even more concerning. Cruz pulled out email printouts obtained through overlooked oversight saying, "These are emails between you and representatives of these requests. Organizations obtained legally through Document March 2020 email from Mediterranean Research Center to your office, stating, 'We appreciate the Congresswoman's continued support on Turkey matters and look forward to her participation in our upcoming policy briefing.' And that email was sent 2 weeks before they paid you $70,500, June 2021. Email from Atlantic Bridge Alliance stating, 'Thank you for the Congresswoman's intervention on the sanctions amendments, as helpfully discussed. We will proceed the agreed fee 2 weeks later. $50,000 payment. October 2021. Email from Global Understanding Initiative stating, 'We hope the Congresswoman will find our recent engagement mutually beneficial. We have prepared the agreed compensation, as stated in our conversation November 2021. $70,000 payment.' Cruz spread the emails out, saying, 'These are not just payments for speeches, Congresswoman. These are payments tied directly to your votes and your advocacy. That is quid pro quo. They paid you. You voted as they wanted. They paid you more. That is not consulting. That is bribery.' Let us discuss why you were really removed from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congresswoman Cruz pulled out the February 2023 House vote records, saying in February 2023, the House voted 218 to 211 to remove you from Foreign Affairs, and the official reason cited was your history of controversial statements about Israel. But I do not think that was the real reason. I think Republicans knew something was wrong with your foreign policy positions, and they could not prove it yet. But they knew Cruz held up a timeline, saying, 'Look at the timing you received your last payment, $70,000. From the Global Understanding Initiative. In November 2021 inches, January 2022, the first ethics complaints were filed, questioning your financial disclosures by November 2022. Multiple Republican members were raising concerns about your foreign policy votes and potential conflicts of interest. In January 2023, new Republican House leadership took over in February 2023. They removed you from Foreign Affairs Committee officially. It was about your Israel statements, but I think they were protecting national security, because, Congresswoman, you had demonstrated that your foreign policy positions were for sale, and they could not prove it publicly. Yet, because the evidence was not complete, but they knew you could not be trusted with America's foreign policy, so they removed. You. Cruz leaned forward, saying, 'And you know what happened after your removal? The payments stopped November 2021. Last payment from foreign entities February 2023, removed from committee March 2023 through present, 0 foreign consulting payments. Why did the payments stop? Congresswoman, because you were no longer useful to them. You could not influence foreign policy anymore. You had no committee assignment relevant to their interests. So they stopped paying. That tells us everything. These were not legitimate consulting arrangements. They were payments for access and influence. And when you lost your influence, you lost your payments. That is textbook corruption. Now, let us discuss what you mentioned in your defense. Cruz pulled out Omar's public statements, saying, after your removal from Foreign Affairs, you gave multiple interviews. Let me read some quotes. CNN, February 2023. This is about Republicans not wanting a Muslim woman who speaks the truth about Palestine. On the committee, MSNBC, February 2023, I am being punished for my willingness to challenge the status quo on human rights. The Guardian, March 2023, they removed me because they cannot handle someone who puts human rights over political expediency. Beautiful rhetoric. Congresswoman, you position yourself as a martyr for justice. But now we know the truth. You were not removed for speaking truth to power. You were removed because you were taking money from foreign governments and voting as they directed. You were elected removed because reporters suspected you were compromised. They were right. Cruz pulled out one more document, saying this is a letter from then-Speaker McCarthy to the House Ethics Committee dated January 2023. He wrote, I have received credible information suggesting potential conflicts of interest regarding Representative Omar's foreign policy positions and outside income. I respectfully request the committee investigation these matters. McCarthy could not prove anything publicly, but he knew something was wrong, so he referred it to Ethics Committee and removed you from the committee where you could do damage that was not political persecution. Congresswoman, that was protecting national security from someone who had been compromised by foreign money. Ted Cruz put down his documents and looked directly at Ilhan Omar, saying, Congresswoman, you started this hearing by questioning my loyalty to America because I was born in Canada. You implied that my birthplace somehow compromised my commitment to this country. So let me tell you about loyalty. Cruz's voice was calm but intense, saying, My father, Rafael Cruz, was born in Cuba. He was imprisoned and tortured by the Bautista regime. When he was a teenager, he fought for freedom. He was beaten. He nearly died. When he finally escaped Cuba in 1957, he came to America with nothing, $100 sewn into his underwear, no English, no connections, no guarantee of anything. He came here because America represented something his homeland did not: freedom, opportunity, the rule of law. He arrived in Texas and worked washing dishes for 50 cents an hour. He learned English. He put himself through the University of Texas. He started a business. He built a life. Taught me something. Fundamental American citizenship is precious. It is not about where you were born. It is about what you believe and how you serve. I was born in Canada because my parents were working in the oil industry when I was 4. We moved to Texas. I grew up in Houston. I am as Texan as anyone. I studied at Princeton and Harvard Law. I clerked for Chief Justice Rehnquist. I served as Solicitor General of Texas. I have argued before the Supreme Court 9 times, defending American constitutional principles. I have spent my entire adult life defending this country's constitution and laws. Cruz's voice rose slightly. Said so when you, someone who took $250,000 from foreign governments while voting to support their interests, question my loyalty. Let me ask you, who were you serving? Were you serving the people of Minnesota's 5th District for the constituents who elected you? Or were you serving the Qatari government that paid you $45,000? Were you serving American foreign policy interests? Or were you serving the Turkish regime that you $77,500? Were you serving American national security paid? Or were you serving the Muslim Brotherhood connected? Organizations that paid you $70,000? Don't talk to me about loyalty. Congresswoman, loyalty, to America, is documented by decades of public service, the Constitution. Your loyalty is demonstrated by your bank account. You took foreign money. You voted as they directed. You hid the payments until caught. That is not American patriotism, that is foreign influence. You mentioned dual loyalty. Concerns? Congresswoman, you implied they are only raised against Muslims. Let me be very clear. This is not about your religion. This is not about your background. This is not about being Muslim or being an immigrant. This is about money. Foreign money. Money you took from foreign governments while voting on their interests. When Senator Menendez, a Catholic born in America, took gold bars from Egypt, we prosecuted him. He is going to prison. When Paul Manafort, a white Christian born in America, took money from Ukraine and failed to register under FAR, we prosecuted him. He went to prison. This is not about targeting Muslims. This is about enforcing the law equally. You violated FAR. You violated House disclosure rules. You money and voted as directed. Those are crimes. They are crimes, regardless of your religion, your background, or your identity. Cruz held up the evidence folders, saying, "You can try to make this about Islamophobia. You can try to claim victimhood. You can try to hide behind your squad allies. But you cannot hide from documentary evidence bank records. Do not have religious biases. Tax returns. Do not discriminate FAR databases. Do not target Muslims. Vote tallies. Do not care about your identity. The evidence shows you took foreign money and acted as an unregistered foreign agent. That is not an attack on Muslims. That is foreign federal law. I prosecuted terrorists when I was at the Department of Justice. Congresswoman ISIS. Al-Qaeda people who committed actual violence. I never once assumed someone was guilty. Followed the evidence always. Only the evidence, and the evidence here shows you violated federal law. Not because you are Muslim, because you took foreign money and failed to register and vote as directed. Those are facts, not biased. Now, Congresswoman, you have sat here for over an hour listening to me present evidence. Let me give you a chance to respond. Cruz's tone shifted. This was Supreme Court advocate, methodical, relentlessly. Let us start simple. Did you or did not receive $247,500, $500 from foreign government-funded entities between 2019 and 2021? I received consulting fees from various organizations. Yes, did those organizations, including Doha Policy Institute, funded by Qatar's government? They were one of several yes or no. Congresswoman, yes. Did you receive $45,000 from them, according to my disclosed disclosures? Yes. Did you initially fail to disclose that payment? Omar hesitated. There was an accounting error. Yes or no? Did you fail to disclose it in your original 2019 financial disclosure? Yes. Did you receive payments from Mediterranean Research Center, funded by Turkey's government? Yes. $37,500. Yes. Failed to initially disclose. Yes. Justice and Development Foundation, connected to Turkey's ruling party, $40,000. Yes. Failed to disclose. Yes. Cruz was building his record. Each admission. Documented Atlantic Bridge Alliance, $55,000. Yes. Global Understanding Initiative, $70,000. Yes. So we have established you received $247,500 from 5 entities funded by or tied to foreign governments. You failed to disclose any of these payments initially. Correct the disclosures. Were corrected after you received a document preservation notice from this committee. Investigating foreign influence. Correct the timing was. Coincidental? Yes or no? Congresswoman, did you file altered disclosures 3 days after receiving our notice? Yes, but thank you. Now, did you register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act for any of these consulting arrangements? I was not required. To yes or no did you register? No. Have you ever registered under FAR for any activity? No. Are you aware that providing consulting services for foreign government-funded entities while receiving payments requires FAR registration? My lawyers said yes or no. Are you aware of FAR's requirements, generally? Yes, did you? Consult with a FAR attorney before accepting these payments. Omar paused. I consulted with my personal attorney. Is your personal attorney a FAR specialist? I do not know. Did they specifically advise you that your activities were exempt from FAR? They said it was fine. Did they give you a written legal opinion stating your activities were exempt from FAR? Not written, but so no written opinion. Did they explain which exemption applied? They said, members of Congress conducting official duties were these. Consulting arrangements part of your official duties. They were related to policy, yes or no, were paid consultations with funded foreign entities, part of your official duties as described in House rules, not strictly. But thank you. So you took $250,000 from foreign entities never registered under FAR, had no written legal opinion supporting exemption, and these were not official duties. Correct, Senator. You are oversimplifying. I am establishing facts. Congresswoman, now let us discuss your votes. Cruz pulled up the voting record after Qatar's Doha Institute paid you $50,000. You voted against a resolution condemning Qatar's support for terrorism. Correct, that resolution was poorly written. Yes or no? You voted against it. Yes, but the substance. You were one of only 17 members to vote against it. Correct. Yes. After Turkey's entities paid you $77,500, you voted against sanctions on Turkey multiple times. Correct, Turkey is a NATO ally? Yes or no? You voted against Turkey sanctions. Yes, you refused to vote for the Armenian genocide resolution. Correct? I voted present because you refused to condemn Turkey's genocide of Armenians. Yes or no? I voted present, which meant to condemn. Thank you. After the Global Understanding Initiative paid you $70,000. You voted against sanctions on Muslim Brotherhood-connected organizations to correct. That is a mischaracterization. Yes or no? You voted against those sanctions. Yes, Cruz. Leaning back. So, the pattern is clear. Entities foreign paid you. You voted exactly as they would want, every single time, and you see nothing wrong with that. Were my principled positions that happened to align perfectly with whoever was paying you. How conveniently, when Ted Cruz finished his cross-examination, the hearing room was in chaos. Democrats trying to defend Omar, Republicans calling for criminal referral media in. Absolute frenzy, cameras everywhere. But Omar sat frozen, her earlier defiance completely shattered. The Supreme Court advocate had done what he does best, built an airtight case with documentary evidence. No speculation, no conspiracy theories, just bank records, tax returns, vote tallies, and FAR database searches, all public record, all verifiable, all devastating inventory. Durbin tried to restore order. The committee will take a 30-minute. But Cruz was not done, Mr. Chairman. Before we recess, I move that this committee refer Representative Omar's conduct to the Department of Justice for investigation of potential FAR violations. I further move that we refer this matter to the House Ethics Committee for investigation of disclosure violations and potential corruption. And I move that we ask the House leadership to consider whether Representative Omar should retain any committee assignments pending a resolution of these investigations. The motions passed on party line votes. Republicans 11, Democrats 10 within minutes. The footage exploded across. Every platform destroys. Omar trended at 25 million mentions. Agent Omar hit 18 million. Far forgotten by Omar reached 12 million. But this was not typical partisan warfare. Something different was happening. Even mainstream media could not ignore the evidence. The bank records were real. The altered tax returns were filed. The FAR database was public. The vote was mathematical. CNN. Omar's foreign payments raised serious legal questions. MSNBC. Progressive Congresswoman faces FAR investigation. After Senate testimony, even the New York Times representative Omar's undisclosed foreign income triggers calls for investigation. The most devastating coverage came from legal experts across the political spectrum. Former federal statements on CNN. If these facts are accurate, this is a textbook FAR violation. The Manafort case set the precedent. Omar's conduct appears even more serious because she was a sitting member of Congress voting on constitutional law. Professors. The Foreign Agents Registration Act exists exactly to prevent this type of foreign influence. If Omar received payments from foreign government entities and failed to register, that is a federal felony. Her position in Congress does not excuse her. It makes it worse. Even some progressives who had supported Omar expressed concern. I want to believe Ilhan, but those bank records are real. The timing is suspicious. The vote correlation is hard to explain. This needs a full investigation. For the first time in her career, Omar could not control the narrative because Cruz bad not attack her identity. He had presented evidence of crimes, and evidence does not care about your social media. After the consequences came swift, within 48 hours. First, the Department of Justice announced it was opening a formal investigation into potential FAR violations by Representative Omar. Second, the House Ethics Committee announced an investigation into disclosure violations and potential corruption. Third, House Democratic leadership quietly removed Omar from her remaining committee assignments, pending resolution of ongoing investigations. Fourth, 3 major progressive organizations that had announced Omar issued statements calling for full transparency and cooperation with investigators. Fifth, the Minnesota Democratic Party called for Omar to address these forthrightly, more devastating. Politically, Minnesota's 5th District saw 3 progressive primary challengers announce within a week all emphasize integrity, transparency, and serving constituents, not foreign interests. Omar's approval rating in her own district dropped 23 points in 1 week. Her fundraising, which had always been strongly collapsed, major donors pulled back. Pending investigation results, even squad members were quiet. AOC tweeted general support, but avoided defending the specifics. Rashida Tlaib said nothing. They knew the evidence was too strong. Democratic leadership faced an impossible situation. Omar had been a rising progressive star, a symbol of diversity and new voices. Now, she was a liability. FARA, investigations, foreign money, vote corruption, exactly the kind of scandal Democrats could not defend. And they knew if they defended, Republicans would run ads. Democrats defended foreign influence in Congress, so they stayed quiet and let Omar twist in the wind. Within 2 weeks, leaked reports indicating the DOJ investigation was serious. Grand jury subpoenas, document requests, interviews with witnesses, legal analysis noting the evidence. Cruz, presented in the Senate hearing, is admissible in federal court, bank records, tax returns, vote records, all documentable. If DOJ pursues this, Omar's in trouble. For Ted Cruz, the hearing became a defining moment of his Senate career. He had been a controversial figure. Conservatives loved him, liberals hated him. He had fought with his own party leadership. He had led the 2013 government shutdown fight. But what he did in that hearing was different. He did not grandstand. He did not give speeches. He conducted a methodical cross-examination with documentary evidence. Even his critics acknowledged. Whatever you think of Cruz politically, that was a masterful legal performance. He built a case like a The prosecutor, every question was designed to establish a fact. Every answer was documented. Legal scholars noted parallels to his Supreme Court arguments, the same preparation, the same exactness, the same unwillingness to yield. Washington Post. Cruz' legal background, evident in Omar cross-examine. The Atlantic, how a Supreme Court advocates exposes congressional corruption. Cruz' approval ratings jumped among Republicans 89%. Already high, slight increase among independents 58%, up from 45%. Even among Democrats, 24% up from 18%. More importantly, the hearing established a new standard. Foreign influence would be investigated based on evidence, not party loyalty. 3. Months after the hearing, the Department of Justice announced criminal charges United States v. Ilhan Omar. Count 1, failure to register as a foreign agent under 22 U.S.C. Section 612. Count 2, failures to file FAR registration statements under 22 U.S.C. Section 612. Count 3, making false statements on financial disclosures under 18 U.S.C. Section 1001. Each count carried up to 5 years in federal prison. The indictment was devastated. It incorporated almost everything Cruz had presented in the Senate, hearing the bank records, the timing of the vote, the disclosures filed only after investigation began, legal experts' correlation. This is a strong case. The Manafort precedent is clear. If Omar cannot explain why she did not register under Ferrara, she is. Looking at conviction, Omar maintained her innocence. Her lawyers sued clearance activity. They claimed the payments were legitimate consulting fees, but the evidence was overwhelming. And worse, the progressive movement had moved on. They were not defending her anymore. They were finding new heroes who were not under federal indictment 6 months after the hearing. Facing a trial where seemed likely, Omar reached a plea agreement. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of failure to register as a foreign agent. In exchange, the government dropped the false statements. Charges, condemnation guideline, 18-4. 20 months in federal prison. She announced she would not seek re-election. In 2026, her political career, built on fighting corruption and speaking truth to power, ended because she was caught taking foreign money. And it ended because she made one fatal mistake. She attacked Ted Cruz' Canadian birth and questioned his loyalty in a Senate hearing. Cruz, the Supreme Court advocate who clerked for Chief Justice Rehnquist and argued before the highest court in America, responded the only way he knew how. With evidence, documentary evidence. The kind that holds up in federal court, bank records, tax returns, vote tallies, FAR databases. He built the case. He cross-examined the witness. He established the facts. And when a Supreme Court advocate built a case with evidence, you do not walk away unscathed. You get destroyed. If you made it this far, you have legal testimony, excellence in action. I watched a Supreme Court advocate, a man who clerked for Chief Justice Rehnquist, and argued before the highest court in America 9 times. Scientific documentary destroy a congresswoman with evidence, bank records showing $250,000 from governments, foreign tax returns showing she hid it. For 3 years, FAR database showing she never registered, vote records showing she supported whoever paid her. All documented, all proven, all devastating dollars. More politicians need to be held accountable with evidence. Subscribe, because we are covering the federal trial and verdict of Ilhan Omar. Share this everywhere before mainstream media tries to spin it away. Comment below. Should Omar resign? Before trial, is Farah violating a serious crime or just a technicality? Were you surprised by the strength of Cruz' evidence? Who else needs this level of scrutiny? Turn on notifications, because when a Supreme Court advocate confronts a politician with documentary evidence, this is what accountability like this story proves several critical things. 1. Social media activism means nothing when you are facing federal prosecution with documentary evidence. 2. You cannot call someone a Canadian con artist when you are taking money from foreign governments yourself. 3. Constitutional lawyers who argued before the Supreme Court know how to build cases, real cases, with real evidence. For the Foreign Agents Registration Act exists for a reason to prevent exactly what Omar did. Vic, when you question a loyalty, you better not have taken foreign money yourself. Ilhan Omar thought her squad, allies would protect her, thought her progressive celebrity status was armor, thought attacking Cruz's Canadian birth would make her the victim she was. Catastrophically wrong. Ted Cruz showed that when you attack someone with his legal credentials, Supreme Court clerk, solicitor, general constitutional lawyer, 9-time Supreme Court advocate, you better have clean hands. Omar's hands covered in foreign money, she failed to reveal for 3 years. This is what happens when activism meets evidence. This is what happens when social media celebrity meets Supreme Court-level prosecution. This is what happens when someone who never tried a case attacks someone who argued before the highest court in America. God bless. Supreme Court advocate who knows how to build cases. God bless. United States who follow evidence instead of politics. God bless everyone who believes. Foreign influence must be followed equally, regardless of party or identity. Ilhan Omar learned the hardest lesson when you have taken foreign money, failed to register as required by law, and voted as directed by anyone paid. You attack a Supreme Court advocate is the worst strategy because he has the receipts. All of them before mainstream media tries to spin it away. Comment below. Should Omar resign? Before trial, is FARA violation a serious crime or just a technicality? Were you surprised by the Provide GSEV?